I was stalked, but not because they were into me, because they were into my best friend, Emma. Emma is very gorgeous, like to obscene level, and always had all the guys and girls fawning over her. She had a friend named Mike, who is the focus of the story that I'm about to tell. I met Mike through Emma, and it was clear immediately that Mike was obsessed with her. She was actually into him too for a bit, but she wanted something not too serious. Mike came on hard and heavy, so Emma distanced herself from him. She distanced herself even more after he made some shocking comments about his opinions on sexual assaults mostly being fake. When Emma and I graduated high school, we had planned to move in together, but due to a family situation, she only stayed at her place about 2 days a week and never on a set schedule. She also couldn't keep a job to save her life. Her family life was chaotic and made it where she would have to leave at a moment's notice. Emma also had several places she had crashed at. Her family, friends, my family. It depended on her situation and any odd job she was working. Emma worked a lot of odd jobs. It ranged from babysitting, yard work, elder care, catering, etc. Nowhere stable, and often she wouldn't know what she was doing until that day. After some time that Emma distanced herself from Mike, I started to realize he was at my work often, like 3 or so times a week. It wouldn't have been too weird, except for one thing. My work was at a department store for women and children. No men's clothes at all in this store. At first, Mike would just come in, do a lap, and just leave. It was very weird at first, but honestly I just thought he was walking the mall. Lots of people do that, as my town has practically no entertainment. Then Mike started hanging out in my store and talking to me while I was working. He always talked about Emma, how is Emma, and why is she avoiding me? Those sort of questions. I was very evasive, giving one-word answers, trying to tell him that I needed to get back to work. My manager scolded me for having friends hanging while I was working. When I explained to him that I didn't want him there anymore, and that if he wanted to know anything about my friend, my manager stepped in and asked if I wanted him to talk to Mike. After that, Mike went back to doing a lap and leaving until my manager eventually stationed a big loss prevention guy at my register as a deterrent. It worked. No more Mike at work. I had won. Except for one thing. I had not counted on Mike being extra creepy. He started showing up at my house. Couple of points, Mike didn't have a car and I lived in a different town than him. My family and my job are about 20 minutes away from him by car. There wasn't any public transportations in my town or in his. Uber didn't exist in this area either, and Mike didn't have a job as far as I knew. Mike knew where I lived now because when I first moved in, we had a housewarming party and I accidentally made the Facebook invite public. Mike started coming over at random times, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes in the evening, always asking to speak to Emma. I always told him that Emma wasn't there, even if she was. For her safety, I advised her to not come to my house anymore and to tell Mike she wasn't interested, which she did. She kept her distant and finally blocked them. And this time I finally got a new roommate, a coworker of mine who was also female. She had a gun and a very big, intimidating looking boyfriend. Mike started coming by less frequently now, and anytime he did I would tell him that he wasn't welcome. Now, I know I should have called the cops, but there was 2 things preventing me. 1, I was from a not grand family who avoided cops for the most part. And 2, my roommate was a criminal law major and she was already concerned about how that would appear for her career. Not great reasons, but for a 19-20-year-old it was enough reasons for me not to mention it. Eventually, I stopped seeing Mike, but I would still occasionally spot him at places that I was at. The mall, my town's grocery store, and in my dog's favorite park. I stopped posting on Facebook around this time because even though Mike was blocked, he was clearly still able to see my posts somehow. I also got this creepy feeling that he was coming by my house sometimes. My stuff on my porch would be moved. At night, my motion sensor lights would go off and I kept finding Mike's cigarette butts. At least, it was the same kind that he smoked. My roommate had been there for about 4 months when one night she had her boyfriend over when someone started pounding on the door. When her boyfriend answered, he saw someone who looked like Mike and started to run away. The next day, my roommate and her boyfriend went out of town for a concert. She gave me her gun, even though I felt safe because she had gotten a dog that she was training to be a guard dog. I started watching a cooking show in the living room, and at some point, I fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up to my dog and the guard dog losing their minds, barking like mad at the window. There was a tall figure that bolted as soon as I sat up. I grabbed the gun, opened the door, and I yelled, "I know that's you! I have a gun and I'm calling the cops!" Which I didn't do. I just locked me and the dogs in the bathroom and called my dad, who luckily wasn't angry at all about being woken up in the middle of the night. He drove over and advised calling the cops and filing a restraining order. We called the cops, but they said nothing was broken and there was no evidence. There was nothing to be done about it. Luckily after this, I heard that Mike's family sent him to live with a relative in a different state. He did come back a couple years ago, but he was wise enough to only contact me once when I got to tell him that Emma was not only happily married now, but not at all interested in talking to him. I reminded him that I was willing to call the cops if he ever came near either of us again. He never did, and I don't see him anymore. Though he did try to befriend my husband on Facebook. All it took was another block for him to finally go away for good.
Emma. Emma. Emma.
This happened a while back. I was 18 years old and decided to take a gap year to reflect a bit on my studies and to have new experiences. I ended up going a year abroad in Toronto, Canada to learn a bit of English because it was always useful. I contacted an education company that put me in contact with my foster home, and soon enough, I was ready to leave. It was the very first time I was traveling alone and that far from my country. I'm from Europe, by the way. So I was quite stressed out in the beginning. But as time passed and as I began to make friends, I started to feel quite at ease very quickly with my new environment and fell in love with the city. It wasn't rare that I left and wandered a bit on my own to explore new places. But when I was alone, I always came back before it was dark because I wasn't too comfortable. Plus, being a girl, the people I was living with didn't want me to be outside too long at night as they knew the risks and danger. One day I decided to pay a visit to my first foster family that was living in North York, and I was currently living in Scarborough with my third family. I had to change family 4 times and ended up living in different areas of the city throughout the year. Anyways, so I took the subway. To give you an idea of the length of the events, the trip was supposed to take something like 1 hour, but with traffic and the recurrent problems on the lines, it lasted 2 hours or so. So, I'm waiting for the subway at Kennedy. It was in the middle of the afternoon, so everything was very crowded. But from the corner of my eye, I see a man kind of looking at me. I ignored at first, thinking it wasn't anything and that I was probably just paranoid. But I really wasn't comfortable, so I just put my headphones on and stared at my phone. The subway arrives and everybody gets in. I found somewhere to sit and just minded my own business. After a few minutes, I stopped looking at my phone, wanting to look outside because we were passing on a bridge and I really liked the view. But as soon as I turned my head, I saw the same man standing up and staring directly at me. When he saw that I saw him, he gave me a very creepy smile at me. I was a bit concerned but not scared, because even though I had been there for only 3 months, I knew that there was a lot of weird people in this city. Not wanting to be rude, I smiled back and then stared back at my phone, not wanting to meet his eyes again. I really began to worry when the subway arrived at St. George. The subway stops, I get out, and I start walking to take the subway on the yellow line and then wait for it to come. When I turn my head to see when he's supposed to arrive, I see the same man as before, still staring and smiling at me. I'm not smiling at him anymore and I quickly avoid eye contact. After a few minutes, the subway finally arrives. I jump in it and change wagon, wanting to be as far away as possible from that man. Time passes and I don't see him in the crowd near me, so I'm feeling a bit better. I remember feeling silly to think that someone was even following me. The subway finally arrives at Shepherd West and I start walking to catch my bus. Doing so, I'm reaching for my pass, but it falls on the ground, so I stop, pick it up, and when I look back up, there he is. The creepy dude walking towards me, staring and smiling again. I changed direction and started walking faster, hoping to reach the bus stop and having more people around me. I get there, but he gets there as well and I can feel him looking at me. At this point, I was completely freaked out. Not only because I was scared as hell, but also because I didn't want him to know where my foster parents were living, considering that the bus stop was really close to their house. The bus arrived and we all got in. There weren't any available seats, so I decided to stand close to the door. That's when I thought of a way out. I knew that people were going to press the button for my stop because a lot of people were getting off there. So I waited patiently for my stop. Someone then eventually pressed the button as I anticipated, and I waited that a maximum of people to get out of the bus. Then, when the bus started to close the doors, I jumped out of the bus and started walking in a random direction, so if the creepy dude was looking at me, he wouldn't know where I was going. I was very lucky that the bus driver didn't reopen his doors. After walking for a bit, I turned around and started heading to the house of my foster parents, relieved that it was finally over. I spent a few hours there and decided not to talk about my recent experience. Them being quiet, old, and tired most of the time, I didn't want them to worry or drive me home. Later that day, I thanked my family, wished them a happy evening, and went outside to the bus stop across the street. After a few minutes, the bus arrived. I get in, looked around for somewhere to sit, and then I froze. The man was now sitting in the back of the bus. I didn't move for a few seconds. I went to sit next to a lady in the front of the bus, completely panicking. I was wondering how he could have ended up in the same bus as me. It couldn't be bad luck. No, he followed me for 2 hours before that. At the time, I had no idea, but now I think that when I got out of the bus, he got out of the next stop, which isn't very far from mine, so we could kind of see if there's people waiting at the next stop, and he just waited for me to take the bus again. That day, I was wearing a bright yellow mustard color hoodie, so I think he knew it was me, even from the distance. The bus started driving and I felt helpless because it was clear to me that I wasn't paranoid anymore, that this man clearly wanted something out of me. The big mistake I made here wasn't to alert the people on the bus. They could have helped me get out of the situation by scaring the guy off. But as I said, I was panicked and wasn't thinking clearly. When we arrived at the station, I almost started running down the stairs to try to catch the subway, but arrived a little bit too late. He arrived a few seconds after and went to sit down on a stone bench, still looking and smiling at me. The entire time, I was desperately thinking of a way to get out of this situation. Then the subway finally arrives, and I think I've never had that much luck in my entire life. When the doors opened, I saw two of my friends, one of them being a guy that is quite built, sitting in the wagon. They told me afterwards that they were going downtown to go to the gym together. I got up and ran up to them, explaining the situation that I was in. The creepy dude went and sat close to us in the wagon, and when he saw that I knew them, he got out at the next stop. I never saw him again afterwards, and I never, ever wished to experience something like this again in my life. I had never been followed before that, and this experience had taught me to always have my keys in my fingers when I'm walking alone, even now. This happened about 4 years ago when I was a bartender, but I think about it often and it has changed the way I operate throughout life. I now refuse to go to any store alone after midnight. For the story's sake, I will tell you that I was 25 and an attractive blonde at the time. On a busy Friday night, I was bartending with the bar manager and he had noticed that we were very low on some bar necessities after the dinner rush. So I was sent out to go to a 24-hour grocery store down the road to pick up odds and ends that we would require to get us through the weekend. I picked up everything that was asked of me without trouble at the store until I got to the liquor aisle. There were these two country-looking guys that were probably around my age in the aisle, and they were staring at me and whispering to each other in a way that made me feel uncomfortable, as I assumed they were making comments about me. All pretty innocent so far. Before they could approach me, I grabbed what I needed very quickly and power walked to the self-checkout. I really booked it out of there because when you're a bartender, it's kinda like you are on stage and required to be charming and interact with people that you otherwise absolutely wouldn't be able to tolerate unless you're getting paid to. Thus why I'm not a bartender anymore. I get to the self-checkout and hot on my tail are the two guys. I'm scanning my stuff as they use the scanning station next to me. I get a better look at them now that they're standing next to me. One is taller, muscular, and average looking. The other guy is shorter and more plump. They both looked dirty and their eyes were completely bloodshot. Not sure if they were high on something or had already been drinking for a while. They continued to stare at me and our eyes awkwardly met, so I did the pleasant Midwestern thing to do and flashed them a quick half-assed smile to be polite. The taller one starts trying to talk to me.
Looks like you're ready to party, huh?
I replied with something like, "Yeah, something like that. It's not for me though." They walk closer to me now and ignore the responsibility to scan their items.
Oh, must be for your boyfriend, huh?
I flash that awkward tight-lipped smile again and roll my eyes slightly, like this is your hint that I am not interested, fellas. The taller one continues to try to talk to me.
You could come hang out with us tonight. We could show you a real good time, if you know what I mean.
I reply with, "No thanks, I'm good. I have plans already." Well, the tall one starts to get upset that his moves aren't working like he'd hoped for, and starts to use a more threatening tone and moves very close to me, like 2 inches away, but I ignore him. I'm staying focused on the scanner. I don't think he had showered in a few days by the smell of him. He gets a little louder and says, "I see how it is."
You probably only fuck doctors and rich men like that. You think you're too good for us. We can show you that you aren't. We can teach you a lesson.
Now, I'm not sure in what context he meant, but it definitely wasn't good. Still not looking at him, I turn away so my body is blocking his view of my purse, which I set on the scanner, to grab my 4-inch pocket knife out and slide it up my jacket sleeve in case I need to protect myself, acting like I am searching for my wallet. I do this, however, in view of the self-scan worker standing at her podium. I look at her with wide eyes trying to communicate that I do not feel safe and I might need help. I turn back to the machine and slide my credit card to pay, while a creepy and hostile guys are practically standing on top of me. The machine malfunctions and starts beeping. The lady worker comes over immediately and the guy standing next to me changed their expressions from, "I am planning to torture you for a couple days and toss your body in a creek," to "just your friendly good old country boys making polite conversations over here." They actually tried to act like I knew them and we were friends, so the worker wouldn't be alerted to their ill intentions. They tried joking with the worker, saying that I was stealing something and that's why the machine went off. The worker wasn't buying any of this. She was a 6-foot-tall woman with some muscle on her, by the way. I wouldn't mess with her on my best day. Anyway, she starts pressing a few buttons on the screen, shooting the guys a very unimpressed look when they were trying to act charming, and cancels the order completely. She turns to me and says, "I am sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. This machine seems to not be working correctly. Why Why don't you gather your things and I will ring you up at an actual register? She puts her hand on my back and gives me this wide-eyed look like I gave her a minute earlier, letting me know that she sees that I am in danger. I pick up my things to follow her to a register that is near the security office. The guys linger around the self-scan, still glaring at me, and eventually complete their purchase. But they start to stand at the exit, assuming they are waiting for me. I feel like I'd be walking to my death if I even made my exit in that moment. The worker keeps a close eye on the guys and scans my items. As she's scanning, she tells me there really wasn't anything wrong with the machine I was using. It just misread my credit card. She said, I had a bad feeling about those guys from the moment they walked in, and then I saw them getting aggressive towards you. I already rang a security guard to be ready to walk out the parking lot and make sure you left safely when you were ready to leave. Then I saw you take that knife out and put it up your sleeve, getting ready to protect yourself. As much as I'd like to see you show them they picked the wrong chick to mess with, I'm glad I was able to pull you aside and make sure you are safe. I see them waiting by the door for you. I'll just keep pressing buttons on the screen and act like I'm having trouble with your order until they give up and finally leave and go outside. Our security officer and I will still escort you to your vehicle when you leave. I thought to myself, this woman seriously deserves a raise. I thanked her over and over again and told her what they said to me, and I was getting afraid because I don't know what these guys are capable of. As I'm talking to her, my bar manager calls me to see what's taking so long. I explained what was happening, and he was obviously very concerned and was ready to come up there himself to kick some ass. By the time I hang up, the guys had given up and walked out to the parking lot. The worker said to give it another few minutes because she had a feeling that they still may be in the parking lot waiting for me to walk out and see which vehicle was mine so they could follow me. My instant thought was, no way. They have to be gone by now, right? Wrong. I was very wrong. The worker and security guard escorted me out as if it was after midnight. You can imagine how empty the parking lot was. Towards the back of the lot, there sat a big old pickup truck running with the lights on pointed towards the store. It was a huge parking lot and it wouldn't have made any sense for them to initially park like that, so I'm assuming they moved the truck to sit that way so they had a full view of when I exited the store to go to my vehicle. It was like being stalked by hungry lions. When I unlocked my car and they saw that me, the worker, and the guard were looking directly at them and that I wasn't getting in my car until we watched them leave, they then peeled out of the parking lot. I mean, they seriously did a burnout to establish that they were pissed off and trying to intimidate us or something. Poor creeps didn't get their way. Boo-hoo. I thanked the worker and the guard over and over again as I am certain they had just saved my life, or at least saved me from having to live with whatever those guys were planning on doing to me. I did write a long letter to the store manager and to their corporate location describing how their employees protected me and how grateful I was. I truly hope that earned her a promotion, bonus, or a simple raise. She didn't know me at all and was ready to protect me, which really isn't her job, but she did it anyways. Needless to say, I do not go late night shopping by myself anymore, and I never will again. This happened when I was just 13. It took place during our town's annual festival. It's a big deal in our small town. Everyone gets together to celebrate our town's founding. They throw a big parade and a carnival arrives with rides, games, and food trucks. My parents are highly involved with the event and usually spend most of the time during the week organizing the events and all of the games, so they're always pretty busy. They usually let me go hang out downtown at the carnival with my friend Kelly, who was also 13 at the time. My parents had given me money for rides, games, and food, and let us do whatever we want as long as we're home by 10 p.m. It being summer, we didn't have to worry about school. Kelly and I had spent most of the time playing games. We came up to the one with the squirt guns where you have to spray the water in the center to blow up the balloon. There was a tall guy with a large gut. His light brown hair was thinning and he had patchy facial hair with scars around his mouth. He gave me very bad vibes, especially with the way he looked at Kelly and I. Guys his age shouldn't look at girls at our age like that. It creeped me and Kelly out. Neither of us won the game, so we moved on and got in line at the Gravitron. I could still feel this guy's eyes on us as we entered the big circular spaceship. As soon as the ride started, I forgot all about him as Kelly and I had lots of fun being stuck to the sliding panels. After we got off, we went on a few more rides and played a few more games as it started to get dark. After we got off, we went on a few more rides and played a few more games as it started to get dark out before sharing an elephant ear and lemonade. We sat at a picnic table to eat when I saw him. He was staring at us with a very wrong look on his face. His scarred mouth was in a sadistic smile as he watched us. My heart stopped in my chest and I felt sick. I dropped my food as I lost my appetite. Kelly and I both agreed to call it a night and head back to my house. We got on our bikes and started to ride down the street. My house wasn't far, it was only a few blocks out of downtown. I made the stupid mistake of looking back and I nearly screamed. Only a block away was that large man. He was walking quickly towards us. Kelly and I pedaled hard to my house and didn't even bother to put our bikes away before we rushed inside and locked all the doors and windows. I called my parents but they didn't answer. Both Kelly and I were freaking out. We looked out one of the windows to see the man in my yard. He was staring at us in the darkness. I could feel his eyes piercing into mine. Kelly started crying. We both started to panic as the man started to walk up the stairs of my front porch. We rushed away from the window as he tried to open the door. I grabbed the phone and quickly called 911. I know I probably sound crazy as I hysterically tried to tell the operator what was going on. I was sobbing and crying as the man started banging on the door now. They told us to lock ourselves in the bathroom, that they were sending someone on their way. Kelly and I ran upstairs and hid in the bathroom, locking it as we heard a window break. Both of us were in tears as we heard the door open. The operator was still in line. She told us to remain calm, but my heart was pounding so loudly I'm sure he can hear it. We both could hear the floorboards creaking as he made his way throughout the house. Then he spoke, and this is when my stomach turned.
Here, girlies. Come out wherever you are. I will find you. I won't hurt you. I just want to have some fun.
Both of us had our hands clenched over and our mouths as we heard him start to climb the stairs. I heard him open the door to my bedroom and walk inside. I could hear this sick fuck go through my closet and open my dresser drawers. The thought of his dirty hands rummaging through my clothes made me sick. He walked out of my bedroom and we can hear his footsteps just outside the bathroom door. Kelly and I just looked at each other with tears streaming down our faces.
I know you're in there. Come out and I won't hurt you. I promise.
He said. He had that deep voice that sounded like a toad. He slammed into the door, making us both jump.
I'm getting mad now. Open the damn door!
We both started crying hysterically as he tried slamming into the door again. We both knew if he could get that door open, we were both good as dead. Suddenly, we heard the sounds of the police sirens outside. They finally arrived. He frantically tried breaking the door open one last time, but then the police entered our house and shouted their presence. We heard the man try to run as the police rushed upstairs. They managed to catch him and haul him out after a loud struggle. We finally got the courage to open the door as the policewoman found us. She comforted us, but we still couldn't stop crying. When my parents finally came home, they were beside themselves. My mother nearly had a heart attack. It was safe to say that this was the last summer they would be involved in the festival. I had found out that the man had gone through my underwear drawer. It made my skin crawl to know he went through my things. We later found the identity of the man and that he had spent over 10 years in prison for a rape charge. He didn't even work at the carnival. They found the person who was supposed to be working at the squirt gun game dead. That man killed them. I can only imagine what would have happened if the police hadn't gotten there to save us just in time. Even after lots of therapy, I still haven't gotten over that night. I spent years, and I mean years, just looking over my shoulder, still remembering when I saw his face that night. I still have a hard time being alone at night, even after all these years.
I'm gonna kill those two little bastards one day.